Hello and welcome back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and this project is going to be another one that involves working with the finger brake. You might notice it's sitting in a different position now. I've done a little bit of rearranging here in the Tin Barn. I actually moved my surface grinder too. We'll be using that in this project, and I'll show you the reason I moved it and it's set up. But what we're going to do on the finger brake today, the fingers that came with this were a 1 inch, a 2, a 3, a 8, and a 10. 1, 2, 3, 8, 10. 8, 10. I got ready to fold up a little pan the other day that just using a piece of material I had, and it was going to come out with the sides. This is not it, but it was one similar to this. By the time I did the fold over to give a smooth edge at the top, the lip up here, the base of it was 7 inches. So I decided, well, let me see what fingers I need to do 7 inches. And there's no possible combination of 1, 2, 3, 8, and 10 that will give 7 inches. I'll put up a little sheet right here where you can see. But everything from 1 inch to 24 inch is obtainable with the factory fingers, except for 7 inch and 17 inch. Now, what I did to make that particular pan, I just used my 1, 2, and 3, which is 6 inches, and left a little space, about a 1/2 inch space between the two of them. And that worked okay, but it was, of course, not as crisp a fold right there where that blank was. So what we're going to do today is make up a another 2-inch block to fit on this, another 2-inch finger. And while I'm at it, I'm going to make an 1.5-inch finger. With just the addition of the 2-inch finger, the 2-inch, I'll be able to get the 7 and the 17, as you can see in this image. Be able to get anything from 1 to 24. By adding the 1.5-inch block as well, I'll be able to get 1/2 inch increments, anything from 1 inch to 24 inches in 1/2 inch increments. So I'm going to be doing 2 of these. One of them will be 1.5 inches wide. The other one will be 2 inches wide. They're going to involve a 45-degree full 45-degree angle on this side. On this end, it's got just looks like a 1/4 inch maybe chamfer on that end. Of course, a hole in the middle. But and the thickness is very crucial. I think these are 436 thousandths. I got some stock material over on the bench. But we're gonna start out machining these to width, which is going to be a combination first of coming over to the surface grinder and getting one edge perfectly smooth. Get it flat. Then I'll carry it over to the mill, put that good surface down, and mill this down to within about 10 thousandths of the width. Come back to the surface grinder, get it to width. Then we'll start working on the thickness. So let me get set up over on the surface grinder, and we'll get one edge on each of these 2 pieces. All right, here's the surface grinder in its new position now. And I'm sure all of you are aware, most of you are aware, but here in the Tin Barn, I've 2 wood floor. And where the surface grinder was sitting before, I actually had a 2 pieces of 3-inch channel iron spanning across about 3 of the floor joist. And that steadied it up a whole lot. But it was still not as steady as it would be on a concrete floor. So what I did, I came over here. This position is directly behind the lathe now. The white panels you see there behind the surface grinder is the backsplash for the lathe, and the tool holders up at the top. But I did some rearranging and cleaned out this spot over here. Right beside of it, I've got the shelves now with my air tool storage rack that I showed in a previous video, some of the various tools that go with the surface grinder. But what I did before I moved it over here, I cut the flooring out. Of course, it was about 8 to 10 inches under there. I filled up that about halfway with some chunks of concrete, or I'm sorry, chunks of asphalt that had been taken up that I've actually got a storage pile of it here just to fill holes in and so forth. But then I filled the rest of it up with concrete and got it set, got the surface grinder on it. I actually let that cure for about 30 days before I moved it. Not so much for the concrete to come to its full strength. It just took that long before I got back around to that project. But it's sitting over here now. It's extremely steady now. If you see the camera move any during these video segments, it's not because the surface grinder is moving. It's because me and the camera tripod both are standing on the wood floors. So I'm going to get set up to surface grind one of our edges and bring you right back. The edges on the pieces that we're going to make our fingers out of are currently from the slitting saw, from cutting this out of some stock on the milling machine. But I've got the one that's going to be for the 1.5 inches in the vise now. These are about 40 thousandths over. So again, all I'm going to do right now is try to clean up one edge, and then we'll go over to the milling machine to take some of the extra off. All right, let's spin it up. And we'll run a little coolant on this. Okay, that didn't quite clean up, so I'll come down another thousandths. All right. That cleaned that one up fine. Got a very good surface on that, and it's easily distinguishable from the slit and saw surface. This is the one that will be the 2-inch block, 2-inch finger. I like to do this, that initial touch off, just using the spinning it up by hand. Coming down another thousandths. All right, I'm not sure if you saw it, if you caught it or not, but I saw the piece move a little bit, and you saw me tighten the jaw down tight. But this little import vise don't always, when the jaw's tight, does it always mean it's up against there like it should be. What it was right in between on the notches under the bottom in here. The jaw was tight, but it was not tight on the piece. So I stopped the process and I put a little spacer in between. So I'm comfortable now that it's held in the vise good. I'm going to fire it back up. I've touched off again. And we're going to pretty much start this process over. I sure don't want it throwing the piece out. It's a wonder it didn't throw that smaller one out. Let's get touched off good again. Being a little aggressive on the step over right now until we are clean all the way across. I thought it cleaned up all the way, but there is one more little spot there, so we'll crank back up. All right, I think we're clean now, so we'll go over to the milling machine, flip these over. We got a good reference surface now. Flip these over and get them within 10 or 15 thousandths of the desired width. That way we don't have to do so much grinding over here. So I'll see you at the milling machine. I'm over at the mill now, and I took the two pieces and the side that we did over on the surface grinder, our starting edge, I just used a Sharpie on that, marked it green for good. So we'll turn that edge down now, and it is just barely above our vice jaws, so we'll clear. Be sure that's seated down. All right, I've measured these, and the 1.5 inch piece, which we have in there right now, is about 41 thousandths oversized. I've got 11/16 end mill in there, in the mill now, which should be able to do this in one pass or not any step over. So I'm going to touch off right here and zero out the DRO. We need to take, the 1.5 inch is about 41 thousandths over right now. So I'm going to take about 32 thousandths of that for the on the mill, and then we'll get the rest of it on the surface grinder. So I'm going to come down about 20 thousandths of that to begin with. Get our coolant primed over here. All right, let's make this first about 20 thousandths cut. That end of that mill don't seem to be that sharp, so I'm going to back off just a little bit. The coolant I'm using on this is called Cool Mist. It actually has a green tint instead of the white tint that you see on a lot of other coolants. This mixes 4 ounces to the gallon. I don't have any trouble at all. I've been using it for probably about a year now, and I don't have any trouble at all with rust on the tables or on the vise, so it seems to be working really good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do this piece with that end mill, and then, but when I get to the other piece, I think I'll switch out end mills, because this one just doesn't seem to be cutting very well. I'm going to make another light cut. I'll bring you back when we get started on the second piece. All right, for the 2 inch block, you need to take about 30 thousandths off now. It's 39 thousandths overall, but we're going to take about 2 passes of 15 thousandths. All right, that's got the edges roughed out on both pieces. But before we go back to the surface grinder, we're going to rough out the top and bottom. So I'm going to change out this, or the flats on each side. This piece is way too thick. So I'm going to put the face mill in and be right back. All right, before I take the end mill out, I just remembered I need to get a clean end on here and then get them to length, both pieces. I can do that while we're right here. Then we'll start with the face mill cleaning up the thickness. So all I want to do on this end is just take enough off to clean it up. All right, now I'll take just a couple thousandths climb milling. Just want to take care of any burrs that might stop it from seating down in the vise good. And again, I want to take just enough to clean it up, and then we'll get a length of, yeah, I've got probably 3/8 or 1/4 inch to take off of that. All right, I'll get a measurement. I'm going to set my x-axis DRO to 0. Well, let me get this over to the bench and get a good measurement. All right, what I'm looking is 3.915. We have 4.207. Looks like 192 thousandths, but let me double check. 292 thousandths. All right, I've got right much cutting to do on these two pieces. I'm going to get set up so that I don't necessarily throw the chips back on myself, and I don't throw the coolant back on myself. All right, I'm going to continue this process on this piece and then on the next piece, and I'll bring it back when we start doing the face milling. All right, I've got both pieces milled to length now, and I've got the face mill in. I'm going to start with the 1.5 inch piece. Now, work material, the pieces we're using are 428 thousandths thick. No, I'm sorry, they're 562 thousandths thick, a little over ½ inch. We need them to be 428, so we need to take 134 thousandths off. Now, what I'm going to do is, first off, just take the mill scale off of one side of each piece. Then we'll flip the pieces over, and just like we did on the width for the thickness, we're going to get it to within about maybe 10 or 15 thousandths, maybe 20 thousandths, since we'll have to do both sides on the surface grinder. But we'll get it close, then go back to the surface grinder. So what I want to do now is touch off first, get this under. All right, that's just touching, so I will zero out the Z-axis. All right, let's come down. Again, all I want to do on this first side is remove the mill scale and get a flat surface. So there's about 15 thousandths. Let's try that. Okay, that didn't quite clean up, so we're going to come back to the other side. I'm not going to try to cut any more depth, just simply because of the direction it's slinging the chips now. Really leaving a nice finish though, but it's one little spot down here at this end that it didn't clean up. So we're going to come down. That was 10 thousandths. We'll get 10 more thousandths. All right, that's got this first side cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is flip it over, get it down to within about 20 thousandths of our desired thickness. I'll do the same thing to this piece. Then we'll meet back over at the surface grinder and actually get our finished width and our finished thickness. And then finally we'll come back and put the angles on. Okay, I think we're finished on the mill for right now. We'll go back to it in a minute, but I've got both pieces, got the mill surface off of the two flats. I've got one good edge surface ground. Remember, that's the one we marked in red. I'm sorry, we marked in green. Now, we want to get this to height. This is going to be an 1.5 inch piece. And I'm going to be sure this time that not only does the vise tighten, but it tightens the workpiece as well. Seems with this vise is just that little space in between the notches under here and the thickness of the piece, of where it will tighten down the vise but not necessarily tighten the piece. So what I want to do first, I've got that good surface down. I'm comfortable with it being down all the way, but I am going to tap it with the hammer. And as before, we'll come down till we just barely touch off. All right, I'm going to make a pass on there. Remember, this piece is to be 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make a pass on, then we're going to measure the height of this, of the vise, set it at 0, and shoot for 1.5 inches here on this piece, and 2 inches on this one. Let's turn on our VFD, get it spun up. I shouldn't have to have any coolant on this first touch off. Get our feed going. You remember we left, I can't remember how much it was on these, but it was at least maybe 20 thousandths. But I want to get a clean cutoff all the way across to make it parallel with the side we surface ground earlier in the video. Still not quite touching off all the way. That's why we're doing it on the surface grinder instead of trusting the mill. All right, that is cleaned up all the way across. Now what I'm going to do is take this height gauge right here. Actually slide it on the magnet and zero out right there. Hope you can see that height gauge, and I've zeroed out on the bottom of the vise. Now I will slide this back up here till that touches off, and I'm at 1.502, 2 thousandths to go to be 1.5 inches. I'm very tickled in that. I thought I had left more than that on the mill, but by the time I cleaned it up there, so we're going to take 2 more passes at 1 thousandths per pass. So here comes our first thousandths. And I must say, the surface grinder is working so good on this concrete pad now. You folks that don't have to deal with wood floors just can't imagine how much better this is. Now I'm going to take another thousandths on my dial, and the Z-axis step over. I'm only stepping over about 25 thousandths at a time. Now let's check it one more time with this height gauge. That's still showing 0. And that is right on the money. I really couldn't ask for anything more. 1.5 inches. All right, so I'm going to take this one out, put this one in, do the same process on that. Then I'll bring you back after I take this vise off and mount these down to start working on our thickness. All right, I've got the edges of both pieces parallel with each other now, surface ground. I'm happy with them. I put a fresh dress on the wheel right here. You might can see the edge of it there, nice and clean. And what I'm going to do, I put the best looking side, best filling side of the face mill cut down on the mag chuck. I'm going to surface grind this until I got a clean surface all the way. Then I'll do the same thing with this piece. Then once I get those both pieces with a good flat surface, I'll put them both on here at one time and surface grind them both to thickness. But right now we're just going to concentrate on getting one surface flat. I touched off it along the center in there, but I'm going to take it fairly slow here just in case there's a high spot. I tried to clean all the burrs off before I come over here on the surface grinder. All right, we're going to step down 1/1000ths at a time. I know there's not any real high spots now, so I can take about 100,000ths at a time until I get across. All right, there's one little spot on this end down here that's not quite got yet. So again, I'll go down 1/1000ths. And the wheel here is 200,000ths per revolution, so I'm stepping over about 100,000ths at a time. That's still not going to quite clean it up. All right, I'm going to take one more 1/1000ths. Remember, we got a bevel cut on each end, so if it doesn't quite get it, we can use that side where the angle gets cut. And I'm going to only do a half step this time, or 25,000ths, quarter step. All right, just in case the other side is worse than this side, I will go down one more 1/1000ths and do this same step over and clean up that last little bit on the end. All right, that side is cleaned up on that one. I'm going to put this one down the same way, get one clean side, and then I'll bring you back when we get ready to put them both down and get them to thickness. All right, I've got a good, nice surface grinder finish on one side of each. Gone over to the workbench and checked, and the 2-inch one's just a little bit thicker, so we'll touch off on it. But first, what I want to do is just clean the magnet off good, stone it to be sure, hadn't created any burrs on it or any high spots. Now that should be pretty close to what the wheel is, but I'm going to back it up a couple of thousandths first and just make sure we're clearing. We should be clear everywhere now. All right, we'll try 1/1000ths. Just don't like any surprises when I'm doing this. I want to find that high spot first. All right, we should start making some reasonable contact this time. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I've got this top surface clean on both pieces. All right, I'll bring you back when we get a clean surface here. I'll bring you back to where we're going to actually start cutting or start surface grinding to the desired thickness. Okay, this pass should get us clean, flat surface across both pieces on the second side, of course. Then we'll start measuring to see what we need to do to take it down to the finish. Squeegee off the mag chuck just a little bit to get us a good place for our indicator to set. All right, we can actually touch off on the on the mag chuck itself to set our zero. We're measuring 436. 436, and I'm over here at the workbench now, and what we're looking for is 428. So that looks like about 8 thousandths to go. I tell you what, I sure didn't leave none too much over on the mill when I was doing this. It took a little bit more to clean up that face mill than I was expecting. I think I probably need to check the tram on my mill. So again, let me double check. 8 more thousandths. And I have zero out up here on my dial. I've zeroed that out. All right, we're going to take a thousandths at a time. And the cooler is working very well on here, so we'll keep using it. And again, we're taking a 100,000th step over at a time. All right, I'm going to do that about 6 more times, and I'll bring you back for the last pass. Okay, we're ready to make our last pass on this. Again, it's a thousandths, and we'll take quarter steps around. All right, I believe our pieces are done now on this part of the process. We're going to carry this back to the mill and rough out the angle. Okay, we've got the surface grind on both sides of both of the pieces now. We've got them milled to length and milled and surface ground to width. Before I cut the little bevels on, you remember, I think I showed you this at the first of the video, but on one end, there's just a slight bevel cut on there for a relief, and then on this end, there's a full 45 to clamp down on the work. But before we start working on those, I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes. These are 10mm holes, and I've got them laid out on our finger pieces. All right, we're going to use the wiggler to start with to locate that, to locate the holes. The way this works, when I've got the wiggler stabilized now, and I just ease that into it, and then kind of bottom it out in the hole. And if it stays stabilized, then I'm at the hole position, which it did. So I'll lock down there, and I'm just going to center drill this, then probably lead with a 1/4 inch drill, and then the 10mm. All right, I'm going to do that same process to the other one. Carry them over to the little drill press where I got the countersink in there and deburr them. Then we'll meet over on the bench and get set up to cut our angles. All right, I'm over here at the workbench now. Got the 2 holes drilled and countersunk, or got a little chamfer in there. I've got my 5-inch sign plate. Of course, it's got the 1/4 20 mounting holes in it. I'm going to use a couple of parallels. Set these down. For these to prop up against. And the reason I want to do that, I want to get this end that I'm going to be milling, I want to get it above the edge of the sign plate so I don't accidentally bump into it. Then I'm going to use some of these toe clamps that you saw me make in a previous video. I'm going to use those to hold the pieces down. I want to double check again. All right, the small bevel we're going to do first, and that goes at the end that has the hole. All All right, just being sure everything is seated against the back rail back here, the parallels. Now we're going to set this up for a 45-degree angle. And a 45-degree angle says a gauge block stack of 3.535. I've got this touched off now, and we're going to go down about 140 thousandths total just to give that relief on this side. I've got a 7/16 rough-and end mill in there. I'm going to start with about 50 thousandths. And I'm just going to use cutting oil on this. All right, I got the pieces turned around now. We got our first chamfer relief ground on or milled on one end. Got them turned around now, and we're going to put the full 45 on this end, as such. So I'll cut a little bit of this, and then I'll bring you back when we get ready to make the final cut. All right, I'm going to take this whole setup now over to the surface grinder, get that set up, and meet you back over there. Okay, I'm over at the surface grinder now. I've got this whole setup that we had on the milling machine over here, the sign plate. I turned these top clamps down just a little bit, and I've touched off, and it's to get the wheel completely off this side is going to mean touching the corners of these clamps, just barely touching them. But that's fine. These clamps are meant to hold the work, and if they're disposable, so be it. But we'll get it spun up now. Okay, looking at that edge over here on the surface grinder, I could have probably took a little more off on the mill. So I'm going to have a few more passes on here than I anticipated. But I'm going to get these, get it ground down to where we got again, not a razor sharp edge, but a reasonably sharp edge on the back side. I'll bring you back then. All right, I think we're ready to make our last couple passes on here. This is going to be 1/1000ths again, with smaller step over. All right, now I'm going to go down 3 thousandths. And I'm only taking about 20 thousandths step over at the time now. All right, I'm going to pull it out here and take a look at it. Yeah, I'm happy with that edge right there. Everything is kind of suctioned down here. All right, so here's what one of the fingers looks like. We got a 45 there. Again, we don't have a razor sharp edge there, but we did come out to a peak. So I'm going to turn these around now, or turn the camera around, and get you set up on the brake, and I'll show you we'll conclude this video. Okay, here's our two new fingers installed on the brake. Excuse me. Interestingly enough, this one appears to be a lot different color, but what it is, when I ground these at a diagonal, this diagonal, I can barely see the grinds going this way and here that way. Any case, they were cut out of the same piece of metal and ground at the same time, and got them in there, and I just want to make a bend on a sacrificial piece. What I'm looking for is to see if I can detect any crimps or anything like that in the folded piece where these fingers are. And I don't. Be sure we're in frame here. That looks fine all the way through. Now, as I showed you before with the original fingers on here, the original fingers that come with it, I could get from 1 inch to 24 inch in 1 inch increments but could not get a 7 or a 17. With these new fingers, with the original fingers plus the 2-inch and the 1.5 that we just made, I can get from 1-inch to 24-inch again, but now I can get in 1/2-inch increments and can make every step again between 1-inch and 24-inch in 1/2-inch increments. Not sure any of you will ever have a need to duplicate this project, but I hope you enjoyed watching some surface grinder work and some mill work. And y'all take care, and we'll see you on the next video.